Hello everyone. In this session, I am going to discuss literary terms starting with letter J, L, and M. The first literary term is jeremiad. It is a term derived from the Old Testament prophet Jeremiah, who in the 17th century attributed the calamities of Israel to its violation of the covenant with Jehovah and written to pagan idolatry, denounced with gloomy guilt its religious and moral iniquities, and called on the people to repent and reform in order that Jehovah might restore them to his favor and renew the ancient covenant. As a literary term, jeremiad is applied to any work which, with a magniloquence like that of the Old Testament prophet, accounts for the misfortunes of an era as a just penalty for great social and moral evils, but usually holds open the possibility for changes that will bring a happier future. In the Romantic period, powerful passages in William Blake's prophetic poems constitute short jeremiads, and the term is often applied to those of Thomas Carlyle's writing, in which he uses a biblical idiom to denounce the social and economic misdeed of the Victorian period and to call for drastic reforms. The next literary term is lay, a name originally applied to a variety of poems by medieval French writers in the later 12th and the 13th centuries. Some lays were lyric, but most of them were short narratives written in octosyllabic couplet. Marin de France, who wrote in the French language all through probably in England at the court of King Henry II, composed a number of notable poems of this sort. They are called Breton lays because their narrative are drawn for the most part from Arthurian and other Celtic legends. The next literary term is light verse. It is a term applied to a great variety of poems that use an ordinary speaking voice and a relaxed manner to treat their subjects gaily or playfully or wittily or with good natured satire. The subject of light verse need not be in themselves petty or inconsequential. The defining quality is the tone of voice used and the attitude of the lyric or narrative speaker toward the subject. The next literary term is verse de society or society verse. Is a very large subclass of light verse that deals with the relationship, concern, and doings of polite society. It is often satiric, but in the mode of banging rather than severity, and when it deals with love, it does so as a sexual game or in the mode of elegant and witty compliment rather than with passion or high seriousness. The tone is usually urbane, the style deft, and the form polished and sometimes contrived with technical virtuosity. Most poems using intricate French stanza forms, such as the Villian Society verse. The next literary term is linguistics and literary criticism. Linguistics in the systematic study of the element of language and the principles governing their combination and organization. An older term for the scientific study of the constitution and history of language was philology, a term that is still sometimes used as synonym with linguistic. Through the 19th century, philology was mainly comparative. It means the analysis of similarities and differences within a family of related language. And historical, it means the analysis of the evolution of a family of a language or of changes with a particular language over a long course of time. This latter study of the changes in language over a span of time and has come to be called diachronic. The important development in 20th century linguistics came with the shift to the synchronic study of the systematic interrelations of the components of a single language at a particular time. A major contributor to modern synchronic linguistics was Frederick Saussure, a French-speaking Swiss, whose lectures on language as a self-sufficient system, delivered in 1907 to 1911, were also published from students' notes in 1961. And Saussure introduced an important distinction between language and parole. A parole is any particular meaningful utterance spoken or written, and the langue is the implicit system of element of distinction and opposition and of principles of combination which make it possible within a language. And modern linguistics commonly distinguish three aspects that together constitute the grammar: the components and the principle of ordering the component in any natural language like English, French, Japanese, and so on. The first is phonology. It means the study of the elementary speech and sound. The second is morphology, the study of ordering of speech sound into the smallest meaningful groups. And the third is syntx, the study of the way that sequence of words are ordered into phrases, clauses, and sentences. uh, One branch of phonology is phonetics. It is very important. Phonetics, the physical description of the elementary speech sounds in all known language and the way they are produced by the vocal apparatus. The phonetic alphabet is a standardized set of symbols for representing in written form these speech sounds. Another branch is phonomics, which deals with phonemes, the smallest unit of speech sound which within any one natural language are functional, that is, which cannot vary without changing the word of which they are a part into a different word. Thus, in the English word represented by the spelling pin, if we change the only the initial speech sound, we get three different ones: pin, tin, din. If we only change the medial sound, we get pin, pen, pun. If we change only the final sound, we get pin, pit, pill. From the matrix of such changes, we determine that each of the individual units represented by the spelling P, T, D, I, E, U and N, T, L function as differentiating phonemes within the English language. Each language has its own system of phonemes which both overlaps with and diverges from the phonemic system of any other language. The imperfect success that a native speaker of one language, such as German or French, manifests in adapting his habitual pronunciation to the phonemic system of a different language, such as English, is a major feature of what we identify as a foreign accent. The next literary term is local color, the detailed representation in prose fiction of the setting, dialect, customs, dress, and ways of thinking and feeling which are distinctive of a particular region, such as Thomas Hardy's Wessex or Rudyard Kipling's India. After the Civil War, a number of American writers exploited the literary possibilities of local color in various parts of America. For example, the West, the Mississippi region, the South region, the Midwest region, and the New England. The term local color writing is often applied to works which, like Henry's or Damon Runyan's stories set in New York City, rally for their interest mainly on a sentimental or comic representation of the surface particularities of a region instead of a more deep seated complex and general human characteristics and problem. The next literary term is lyric. In the most common use of the term lyric, a lyric is any fairly short poem consisting of the utterance by a single speaker who expresses a state of mind or a process of perception, thought, and feeling. Many lyric speakers are represented as musing in solitude. In dramatic lyrics, however, the lyric speaker is represented as addressing another person in a specific situation. Instances are John Donne's canonization and William Wordsworth's Titanium Abbey. The next literary term is malapropism. It is that type of solecism which mistakenly uses a word in place of another that it resembles. The effect is usually comic, and the term derives from Mrs. Malaprop in Richard Brinsley's charade comedy The Rivals, which was published in 1775, who, in the attempt to display a copious vocabulary, said things such as a progeny of learning, as headstrong as an allegory on the banks of the Nile, and he is in the very pineapple of politeness. The next literary term is Marxist criticism. In its diverse forms, grounds its theory and practice on the economic and cultural theory of Karl Marx and his fellow thinker Friedrich Engels, and especially on the following claims. In the last analysis, the evolving history of humanity, of its social groupings and relations, of its institutes, and of its ways of thinking are largely determined by the changing mode of its material production, that is, of its overall economic organization from producing and distributing material goods. Historical changes in the fundamental mode of material production affect changes in the class structure of a society, establishing in each era dominant and subordinate classes that engage in a struggle for economic, political, and social advantage. Human consciousness is constituted by an ideology, that is, the belief, values, and ways of thinking and feeling through which human beings perceive and by recourse to which they explain what they take to be reality. An ideology is in complex ways the product of the position and interest of a particular class. In any historical era, the dominant ideologies embodies and serves to legitimize and perpetuate the interest of the dominant economic and social class. The next literary term is masque. The masque. It is a variant spelling of mask, MASK, or the MASQUE, was inaugurated in Renaissance Italy and flourished in England during the reign of Elizabethan I, James I, and Charles I in its full development. It was an elaborate form of court entertainment that combined poetic drama, music, song, dance, and splendid costuming and stage spectacle. A plot, often slight and mainly mythological and allegorical, served to hold together these diverse elements. The speaking characters who wore masks were often played by amateurs who belonged to courtly society. The play concluded with a dance in which the players doffed their masks and were joined by the audience. And a similar term is anti-masque. It was a form developed by Ben Jonson. In it, the characters were grotesque and unruly, the action ludicrous, and the human broad. It served as a foil and countertype to the elegance, order, and ceremony of the masque proper, which proceeded in its performance. The next literary term is melodramas. Melos is a Greek for song, and the term melodrama was originally applied to all musical plays, including opera. In early 19th century London, many plays were produced with a musical accompaniment that served simply to fortify the emotional tone of the various scenes. The procedure was developed in a part to circumvent the Licensing Act, which allowed legitimate plays only as a monopoly of the Drury Lane and Covent Garden Theatre, but permitted musical entertainments elsewhere. The term melodrama is now often applied to some of the typical plays, especially during the Victorian period, that were written to be produced to musical accompaniment. The Victorian melodrama can be said to bear the relation to tragedy that farce does to comedy. Typically, the protagonists are flat types, and the hero is great hearted, and the heroine pure as the driven snow, and the villain a monster of malignity. And the plot revolves around malevolent intrigue and violent action, while the credibility both of character and the plot is sacrificed for violent effect and emotional opportunities. The next literary term is metaphysical poets. John Dryden said in his discourse concerning satire that John Donne in his poetry affect the metaphysics, meaning that Donne employs the terminology and abstruse arguments of the medieval scholarist philosophers. In 1779, Samuel Johnson extended the term metaphysical from Donne to a school of poet in the acute and balanced critic, which he incorporated in his Life of Calling. The name is now applied to a group of 17th century poets who are, whether or not directly influenced by Donne, employ similar poetic procedures and imagery both in secular poetry and in religious poetry. Their attempts have been made to demonstrate that these poets had in common a philosophical worldview. The term metaphysical, however, fits these very diverse writers only if it is used as Johnson's used it, to indicate a common poetic style, use of figurative language, and way of organizing the meditative process or the poetic argument. Donne set the metaphysical mode by writing poems which are sharply opposed to the rich mellifluousness and the idealized view of human nature and of sexual love, which had constituted a central tradition in Elizabethan poetry, especially in Spenser and the writers of Petrarchan sonnets. The next literary term is meter. It is the recurrence in regular units of a prominent feature in the sequence of speech sounds of a language. There are four main types of meter in European language. The first is quantitative. It was established by the relative duration of the utterance of a syllable and consisted of a recurrent pattern of long and short syllable. Second is syllabic, which was occurred from French and in any other Romance languages. It depends on the number of syllables within a line of words without regard to the fall of the stress. The third is and central, which is used in Germanic languages and in Old English. It depends on the number of stressed syllables within a line without regard to the number of intervening unstressed. The fourth is accentual syllabic, in which the metric unit consists of recurrent pattern of stress on a recurrent number of syllables. The stress and syllable type has been the predominant meter of English poetry since the 14th century, and it has four standards in English. The first is iambic. It means an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. And second is anapest, two unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. The third is trochlea, in which a stressed syllable followed by an unstressed syllable. And fourth is dactylic, in which a stressed syllable followed by two unstressed syllable. And it has two other feet are often distinguished by special titles. The first is spondic, two successive syllables with approximately equal strong stress as in each of the first 2 feet of this line. Good, strong, thick, stipple, flying, incense, smoke. And the second is pheric, a foot composed of two successive syllables with approximately equal light stress as in the second and fourth feet in this line. My way is to begin with the beginning. A metric line is named according to the number of feet composing it. Monometer means 1 foot, diameter 2 feet, trimeter 3 feet, tetrameter 4 feet, pentameter 5 feet, hexameter 6 feet. It is also known as alexandrine. It is a line of 6 iambic feet, and heptameter 7 feet, octameter 8 feet. I hope you will understand these types of meter. The meter in UGC NET exam is very important. In every year there was a question related to meter. And the next literary term is miracle plays, morality plays, and interludes. They are the types of late medieval drama written in a variety of verse forms. The miracle play had as its subject either a story from the Bible or else the life and martyrdom of a saint. In the usage of some historians, however, miracle play denotes only dramas based on saint lives, and the term mystery play it a sense of the trade conducted by each of the medieval guilds who sponsored these plays is applied only to dramas based on the Bible. The plays representing biblical narrative originated within the church in about the 10th century in dramatization of brief parts of the Latin liturgical service called tropes. And interlude is a term applied to a variety of short stage entertainment such as secular farces and witty dialogues with a religious or political point. The next literary term is modernism and postmodernism. The term modernism is widely used to identify new and distinctive features in the subject forms, concepts, and styles of literary and the other arts in the early decade of the present century, but especially after World War I, 1614 to 1618. The specific features signified by modernism vary with the user, but many critics agree that it involves a deliberate and radical break with some of the traditional ways not only of Western art but of Western culture in general. Important intellectual precursor of modernism in this sense are thinkers who had questioned the certainties that had supported traditional modes of social organization, religion, and morality, and also traditional ways of conceiving the human self thinker, such as Friedrich Nietzsche, Sigmund Freud, James C. Fraser. The next literary term is motif or theme. A motif is a conspicuous element such as the type of incident, device, reference, or formula which occurs frequently in works of literature. The lovely lady who turns out to be a beautiful princess is a common motif in folklore, and the man fatally bewitched by a fairy lady is a motif adopted from folklore in Keats' La Belle Dame since Mercy, which was published in 1820. It is common in lyric poems, and older term for recurrent poetic concepts of formulas is the topos, and the term motif or the German leitmotif is also applied to the frequent repetition within a single work of a significant verbal or musical phrase or set of a description or complex of images, as in the operas of Richard Wagner or in novels by Thomas Mann, James York, Virginia Woolf, and William Faulkner. The next literary term is theme, is sometimes used interchangeably with motif, but the term is more usefully applied to a general concept or doctrine, whether implied or asserted, which an imaginative work is designed to incorporate and make persuasive to the reader. John Milton states as the explicit theme of Paradise Lost to assert eternal providence and justify the ways of God to man. The next literary term is myth. In classical Greek, mythos signified any story or plot, whether true or invented, and its central modern significance. However, a myth is one story in a mythology, a system of hereditary stories of ancient origin which were once believed that they are true, but they are only in the mind of the people. Most myths are related to social rituals, set forms, and procedures in scared ceremonies, but anthropologists disagree as to whether rituals generated myths or myths generated rituals. If the protagonist is a human being rather than a supernatural being, the traditional story is usually not called a myth but a legend. If the hereditary story concerns supernatural beings who are not gods and the story is not part of systematic mythology, it is usually classified as a folk tale. So that's all about the today's session. Thank you so much. If you like my video, please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much.